Am I the man makeover of the week? Are you serious?
Yeah.
So I love my man, but what you mean, but?
There are men who build empires out of nothing. And then there are men who build empires out of pain. Steve Harvey is both. And the reason that distinction matters is because everything he ever constructed, every television deal, every best-selling book, every morning radio broadcast reaching millions of ears before the sun is fully up, was built on top of a foundation that most people never bother to examine closely. When you examine it, really examine it, what you find is not the clean redemption story he has told from stages across the world. What you find is something far more complicated, far more human, and in some ways far more impressive than the polished version he has always preferred to present. He was 68 years old when the ground beneath that carefully constructed life began to shake in ways that even he could not simply smile through. And to understand why what happened mattered as much as it did, you have to understand who this man actually is underneath the suits, underneath the catchphrases, underneath the television persona that has become so familiar, it almost feels like furniture in the American living room. You have to go back to where all of it began, because the beginning explains everything about the ending. Broderick Stephen Harvey came into the world on January 17th, 1957, in Welch, West Virginia. His parents named him after a television actor, which in retrospect feels less like coincidence and more like prophecy written before anyone knew the story. His father, Jesse, worked in the coal mines and later sold insurance. His mother, Eloise, taught Sunday school. The family moved to Cleveland, Ohio, settling on a street that would eventually be renamed in his honor decades later, back when the boy who grew up there was still just a kid with a stutter so severe that other children mocked him daily. They called him V.A. Virum because his words would crash and stall before they could escape his mouth. A man at the neighborhood deli took quiet notice and taught him a technique. Repeat your thoughts silently 3 times before speaking. Speak on the exhale. When young Steve got it right, the man rewarded him with candy. That unremarkable deli counter became the first classroom where he learned that his voice, as broken as it felt, was worth fighting for. The moment that truly set the direction of his entire life came in 6th grade. His teacher asked every student to write down what they wanted to be when they grew up. Steve Harvey wrote that he wanted to be on television. The teacher saved his paper for last, called him to the front of the room, and standing before his classmates, she humiliated him publicly. She told a stuttering boy from a coal mining family that his dream was not only unrealistic, but embarrassing. She called his parents. His mother was mortified. His father was something else entirely. That night, Jesse Harvey walked into his son's room and said the words that would follow Steve for the rest of his life. He said, "Take your paper, put it in your drawer, and every morning when you get up, read it. Every night before you go to sleep, read it. That is your paper." Jesse Harvey died of black lung disease in April of 2000. His mother, Eloise, had already died 3 years before that from a stroke. Neither one of them lived long enough to see the full height of what the paper produced. Harvey has said more than once that this remains one of the heaviest things he carries. The road between that childhood bedroom in Cleveland and any version of success was not a road at all. It was more like a collection of wrong turns, dead ends, and stretches where the darkness was so complete that stopping would have made more sense than continuing. He attended Kent State University, studied advertising, and flunked out. He worked more than 10 different jobs spread across nearly a decade. He boxed. He cleaned carpets. He delivered mail. He sold insurance. None of it pointed anywhere meaningful. Then on October 8th, 1985, he walked into a comedy club in Cleveland for an open mic night, won $50, and cried the entire drive home. Not because of the money, because something had been activated inside him that he had no words for yet. He quit his job the next morning. His wife and infant twins were depending on him. He quit anyway. What came next was 3 years that would have permanently destroyed a lesser person. His first marriage collapsed. Comedy bookings were scarce and paid almost nothing. He ended up living inside a 1976 Ford Tempo with an igloo cooler packed with ice, bologna, and cheese sitting in the back seat. He hung his suits in the rear window to keep them pressed enough to wear on stage. He showered in gas station bathrooms and hotel lobbies. He earned as little as $50 in a given week and gave most of it back to the family. he could no longer live with. He stole fuel from gas stations to reach comedy bookings across the state. He has described a voice he heard during those years that told him to keep going, that promised if he did not quit, something was waiting for him on the other side of suffering. He listened to it. The parachute eventually opened, though it took considerably longer than anyone should reasonably have had to wait. Showtime at the Apollo made him a household name in black households across the country starting in 1993. His television sitcom ran for 6 seasons. The original Kings of Comedy tour he headlined alongside Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hughley became the highest-grossing comedy tour in American history at the time, generating $37 million over 2 years. His book about relationships sold nearly 3 million copies and spent more than a year on the bestseller list. Family Feud, which he took over in 2010, became the longest-running, most-watched version of that show in its 50-year history. He turned the syndicated game show into a $10 million per season enterprise and somehow made it grow in ratings for 7 straight years when every other traditional television property was declining. By 2024, his net worth was estimated at $200 million. The distance between that forward tempo and that figure is one of the most extraordinary journeys in the history of American entertainment. But money and success in television ratings never inoculated him against the specific vulnerabilities that came with being Steve Harvey. In fact, they made those vulnerabilities worse. Because when you build your public identity on being the man who figured love out, the man who can explain to women why men behave the way they do, the man whose marriage is living proof that a broken person can be genuinely repaired, you hand the world a very particular weapon. You hand them the ability to use your own story against you. He had been married twice before Marjorie. His first wife, Marcia, raised their 3 children largely alone after their divorce was finalized in 1994, while he was out chasing a comedy career that demanded everything. He fell so far behind on child support that a judge ordered him to pay back a significant sum. His second marriage, to a woman named Mary, ended in 2005 after Harvey later admitted openly that it ended it for entirely the wrong reasons. He told an interviewer he had been tired of being alone, that the failure was on him, and that it had been bad for a long time. The divorce settlement was substantial, $40,000 per month, a lump sum exceeding $1 million, and multiple properties changed hands. What followed that divorce lasted more than a decade and reached a level of public bitterness that most celebrities never experience. His second ex-wife made YouTube videos viewed hundreds of thousands of times in which she claimed he had been conducting an affair throughout their marriage. She described years of mistreatment. A judge found her in contempt of court for violating a gag order and sentenced her to 30 days in jail. From behind bars, she told a Dallas television station that she had missed years of her son's life and could never get them back. In 2017, she filed a $60 million lawsuit that used language so dramatic it became the subject of national coverage. Harvey's legal team called it entirely without merit. It was eventually dismissed on jurisdictional grounds and never refiled. But the story had already spread, and stories like that never fully disappear regardless of how they are resolved in court. Marjorie Bridges was the counterweight to all of that damage. Harvey had first seen her at a comedy club in Memphis in the late 1980s. She walked in late and sat in the front row. He stopped his set and told the entire room he was going to marry her one day. They dated briefly, separated because he was broke and the timing was impossible, and both went on to marry other people. The reconnection happened in 2005, arranged in part by his personal bodyguard, a man known publicly as Big Boom, who told Harvey directly that the only time he had ever truly seemed happy was when he had been with Marjorie. They married in June of 2007. Harvey adopted her 3 children and called her publicly and repeatedly the woman who had saved his life. At an award ceremony in late 2023, his voice cracked when he talked about her. He said that 85% of everything the world knew about him had happened after he married her. Nobody in that room mistook it for performance. The emotion was entirely real, which made August of 2023 one of the most significant pressure tests that marriage had ever faced. An anonymous post spread from one platform to another with a speed that only truly damaging stories achieve online. It claimed that Harvey had discovered his wife had been romantically involved with two members of his own household staff, his personal chef and, most devastating of all, his bodyguard. Not just any bodyguard, but Big Boom himself, the man who had been personally responsible for reuniting them in the first place. The man whose words had sent Harvey back to Marjorie nearly 20 years earlier was now allegedly at the center of the worst accusation imaginable. The internet did not wait for evidence. It never does. The story was retold, expanded, and treated as confirmed fact across podcasts, comment sections, and social media platforms for months. Harvey was at a major public event in Atlanta when the pressure became impossible to simply absorb in silence. He walked on stage, and before addressing anything scheduled, he stopped and looked directly at the crowd and said he was fine, that Marjorie was fine, and that people needed to find something more productive to do with their time. The crowd responded warmly. Marjorie posted a scripture on her social media account alongside a brief statement that she and her husband did not typically dignify lives with a response, and then she went completely dark on social media for 3 consecutive months. A Nigerian senator who had spoken personally with Harvey confirmed the entire account was fabricated. None of that stopped the story from continuing to circulate. None of it ever does. What made this particular moment land with such crushing weight was not simply the content of the rumor. It was the architecture of the target. Harvey had spent decades positioning himself as the authority on loyalty, on commitment, on what a real man looks like inside a marriage. He had sold that positioning to millions of people in books and television segments and radio conversations every single morning. When you occupy that kind of public space, you create a specific appetite in the culture. People want to believe in you, and that very desire to believe produces an equally powerful desire to see you fail. The more loudly and consistently you claim to have the answers, the more patiently the world waits for the moment it can demonstrate that you were wrong. He was also dealing during this period with accusations from within his original professional community that had been building for years. Comedian Mark Curry had been arguing publicly since late 2019 that Harvey had lifted material that did not belong to him, pointing specifically to a Halloween joke about childhood poverty that Curry had performed on a Comedy Central special years, before a nearly identical segment appeared on Harvey's daytime talk show. A video comparison posted online made the similarities extremely difficult to dismiss. When Cat Williams sat down for what became one of the most watched interviews in the history of the podcast format in early 2024, he amplified those accusations to an audience of more than 30 million people. Another comedian who had worked alongside Curry confirmed that the pattern was real and that it had been known within their community for years. Harvey's responses were broad denials that never directly addressed the specific footage sitting online for anyone to examine at any time. The accusations remain entirely unresolved, and the video evidence remains publicly available. There is also the matter of a night in December of 2015 that anyone who was watching television at that moment will never fully forget. Harvey was hosting the Miss Universe pageant in Las Vegas, a global platform broadcast to nearly 200 countries, when he read from a scorecard and announced the wrong winner. A crown was placed on the wrong woman's head. 2 full minutes of celebration aired live before he walked back out, held up the card, took responsibility in front of the world, and corrected the announcement. The crown was physically removed from one woman and placed on another while cameras captured every second of it. Harvey explained afterwards that the card had been redesigned at the last minute, without his knowledge, that the winner's name appeared in a position on the card that was obscured by where his thumb naturally rested while reading. Design experts who examined the card agreed that the layout was genuinely confusing. None of that analysis slowed down the mockery. An apology tweet compounded matters when he misspelled both country names before deleting it. What very few people reported was that Harvey used the fallout from that moment to negotiate himself into hosting 6 additional Miss Universe pageants. The woman whose crown had been removed in front of the entire world publicly forgave him within a few years and said the mistake was not his fault. The internet held on considerably longer than she did. And through all of this, the bodyguard rumors, the joke theft accusations, the pageant disaster, the decade-long legal battles with his ex-wife, he kept building. He kept showing up 7 days a week exactly as he had told that 6th grade teacher he would. He launched a foundation. He funded full scholarships in memory of a student he had never personally known. He created a mentoring weekend for fatherless boys every single Father's Day. He made early investments in companies that became generational wealth builders. He gave speeches about jumping that 58 million people watched on their phones without any promotional budget behind them. Speeches that did not come from a teleprompter or a writer's room, but from a man who had actually slept in a car and eaten cheap lunch meat from a cooler and showered in gas stations and kept going anyway. The complexity of Steve Harvey is precisely the point. He is not the saint his most devoted followers have always wanted him to be. There's too much documented history, too many court records, too much footage available online for that version of him to hold up under any serious examination. But he is also not the fraud that his most motivated critics have always been determined to prove. He is something considerably more difficult to categorize and considerably more true to actual human experience. He is a man who caused real damage on his way to building something real. He is a man who told the world he had all the answers about love while carrying wounds from his own history that had never fully healed. He is a man who has been publicly humiliated in some of the largest arenas available in modern life, and who has converted a remarkable percentage of that humiliation into continued relevance and continued work. He wrote it down on a piece of paper when he was 11 years old. His father told him to read it every morning and every night, and to believe it regardless of what anyone else said about it. Both of his parents died before they could see the full scale of what that paper eventually produced. He sends a television to a teacher every Christmas as a reminder that he is exactly where he said he would be. He is on television 7 days a week. He is still, by his own honest admission, running from something. And the running has not stopped, and it probably never will. Because the fear that drove him out of that Ford Tempo and onto every stage he has ever stood on is the same fear that gets him up every single morning and puts him back in front of camera one more time. That is the actual story of Steve Harvey. Not the highlight reel, not the scandal sheet, the whole complicated, unresolved, still in progress truth of a man who refused to let a piece of paper become a lie.